The RTS genre is an odd duck. I remember witnessing the rise of the genre in first person playing games like Dune 2 and the first Command & Conquer games way back in the early and mid 1990s. It was a special time, when pretty much every game released felt new, and even the sequels to titles that were established introduced things that were completely new to the series, while still being faithful to the core concepts that had been established by their predecessors. I originally started this channel for the purpose of throwing up my Caesar 3 guides and map walkthroughs, and though I love Caesar 3, I also want to talk about similar games that came out of the same era that still hold up today. And what better place to start than with Blizzard Entertainment's 1998 smash hit Starcraft. Hello everyone, my name's Val. I'm a published author of speculative fiction. To date I've written 3 novels, and my work has also appeared in the world-famous Alfred Hitchcock's Mystery Magazine. As a writer, I've always been interested in video games as a medium for storytelling. So starting with this video, I'm hoping to begin exploring games that got it right, as well as games that kinda got it horribly wrong, and how we might fix them if we were allowed the chance to go back in time. I'll post a link to my work below, but you can also follow me at twitch.tv/authorvalentine, and leave a like and subscribe here on YouTube as well to support the channel. With that out of the way, let's talk about StarCraft and its single expansion, Brood War. The big reason I got started playing these games again was actually because I was playing Stormgate on stream. The early access of Stormgate released 3 missions for free, the first 3 in its first campaign, and the writing and character development was just so horrible I felt the need to go back and see what made the old stuff so good. When one thinks of a compelling story and characters from games, their thoughts probably wouldn't turn to the RTS genre at all, at least not initially. Especially in the 90s, when heavy hitters like Final Fantasy were at their absolute peak, you wouldn't think that a good story could even be told in a game that was the equivalent of moving toy army men around on a giant PC monitor. But one company decided that it was up to the challenge, and in 1998 Blizzard released StarCraft, and forever changed how we conceive of storytelling in video games. For the purpose of this video, I'm going to focus on the Terran Campaign in StarCraft 1. We'll go mission by mission, cutscene by cutscene, and discuss how in just 10 missions, a story was introduced, developed, and concluded with complete satisfaction. The game opens with a cinematic that is risky but perfect for setting the mood. It introduces no characters, there's no exposition about recent events, and everyone who shows up dies. Despite all this, everything we need to know about the story we're about to experience is here. The junk-looking ships, the space rednecks, the dirt, the grime, the scavenging debris fields after a big battle for money, and the giant alien spaceship that appears overhead and goes full Independence Day on everyone involved. It's great. This cutscene purely exists to establish the mood. Space is cold and dangerous, and you're poorly equipped to handle it. That's it. There will be a lot of other cutscenes like this that don't involve any characters relevant to the plot, and all of them are perfect. But let's get back to the actual story. Skipping the tutorial, we arrive at the planet of Mar Sara, where we discover that we, the player, are the magistrate in charge of the planet. Our adjutant informs us that one of our sister colonies, Chao Sara, has been destroyed by something called the Protoss, and in response, the Confederacy, of which we are presumably a member, has tightened security. We are contacted directly by a Confederate general named Edmund Duke, and told that the entire planet is being put in quarantine, and that we are to relocate the entire population out of the city centers and into the wastelands for an effective lockdown of the planet. To this end, we are tasked to meet with the local Marshal Jim Raynor, who will help us accomplish our task. From the very beginning of the first mission, you can sense the tension between the locals and the Confederates. The first line we get as we take control of our units comes from an SCV who can't believe that we are being sent to the wastelands, and that these Confederates think they can push everyone around. It's a small line, but it's so vital in establishing an us versus them divide in our mind. We might be part of the Confederacy on paper, but we're not happy about it. And since the Confederacy already seems to be the backwater of space, what does that make us? There isn't that much else to say here, as this just functions as a tutorial to base building mission, but I do want to comment on the aesthetic. The wastelands are just that, wastelands. There's nothing here save for the giant skeletons of long-dead creatures, and a few hostile aliens that look like bugs who we know nothing about. for now. Mission 2 is when things start to simmer. After successfully relocating the refugees to the Badlands, a station called Backwater comes under attack from the Zerg. Despite the distress signal being sent out, General Duke informs you that you should just sit back and wait for Confederate forces to arrive. Raynor is quick to point out that waiting will only doom the inhabitants of Backwater, and asks that you send him along with the militia to help. When we get to Backwater, we quickly discover that this isn't just some random infestation of small aliens. Organic structures have been erected, the ground is being turned into some kind of bioorganic soup, and even the command center at Backwater has been infested and is pumping out more of the alien menace. Raynor orders the infestation burnt out, but just as the command center is destroyed, Duke arrives and orders Raynor and the militia to lay down their weapons, informing them that they are under arrest for the destruction of Confederate property. What's worse, after an entertaining cutscene involving two soldiers running over a Zergling in their truck, we receive a message from General Duke who tells us mockingly that they don't give a damn about the protests we've lodged. Duke derides us for our questionable loyalty before heading off, leaving the colonists of Marsara to deal with the Zerg threat by themselves. Not only this, but every member of the militia has been arrested. All the while, Zerg sightings have increased, and several stations have already been destroyed. The magistrate sends out a general distress call, but only one party answers: the extremist group known as the Sons of Korhal. Their representative, Arcturus Mengsk, informs you that he can provide evacuation for the colonists of Marsara, but doing so will most certainly lead to the magistrate and all those who cooperate to be branded as traitors and terrorists. With no one else coming to help, however, and with the evacuation zone now coming under Zerg assault, the magistrate has little choice but to comply with Mengsk and make an enemy of the Confederacy he once served. So starts Mission 3, a holdout mission where the objective is simply to survive until Mengsk's transports arrive and the colony can be evacuated. Doing this concludes the first act of the Terran Campaign, and sets up all but one of the major players that will be involved in the rest of the story. In just 3 missions with 3 briefings, Blizzard has accomplished so much. Stakes have been set, villains introduced, and heroes established. We have our traditional Western sheriff type in Raynor, who is instantly identifiable as the good guy. We have the bloated bureaucrat, Duke, who represents the lumbering and inefficient Confederacy. We've got the politician and wildcard, Arcturus Mengsk, who offers his help, knowing that we will have no choice but to accept. And we have the ominous Zerg, who we still know almost nothing about, other than that they are capable of overrunning entire planets in a matter of days. The next act in the Terran Campaign deals mostly with Mengsk, as we get to know the reality of the man we've allied ourselves with. In Mission 4, Mengsk orders us to raid a Confederate outpost on Marsara before the planet is completely overrun, and tasks us to find any designs or schematics for weapons. It's a no-build mission that's fairly unremarkable, but after successfully retrieving the data disks, we are treated to an exposition that merely 13 hours after the evacuation of Marsara, a fleet of aliens known as the Protoss arrived and unleashed a massive bombardment that extinguished all life on the planet. The Protoss won't play much of a part in the Terran Campaign at all, but from this short exposition we can glean 2 things. First, the Protoss are highly advanced, and second, they seem to be trying to burn out the Zerg infestation wherever it might be found. Whether they are ultimately friends or foes of humanity remains to be seen. With Marsara behind us, we arrive at a planet called Antigua Prime, whose inhabitants are also frustrated with the Confederacy and ready to start an open revolt. It's here in Mission 5 that we are introduced to the final piece of our story, Mengsk's right-hand lady and special operative, Sarah Kerrigan. Mengsk tasks us to team up with Kerrigan in order to remove the Confederates from Antigua Prime, who are here under the command of our old pal, General Duke. We start out the mission with just Raynor and a handful of Marines, and are met shortly after by Kerrigan, who Jim finds immediately attractive. As a telepath, she senses his lewd thoughts and calls him a pig, something he less than eloquently brushes off by insisting they get on with their mission. The chemistry between the 2 characters will develop from here, but it's probably the weakest part of the story due to the fact that we really only see them interact a handful of times, but we'll save that for later. Mission 6 gives us our first hint of fractures in the relationships between Raynor, Kerrigan, and Mengsk. When General Duke is ambushed by the Zerg, his ship, the NORAD 2, crash lands, and he sends out a distress call. Raynor shrugs him off as getting what he deserves, but to everyone's surprise, Mengsk orders the Sons of Korhal to assemble and attempt a rescue of Duke and his forces. Mengsk correctly points out that an entire colony shouldn't have to suffer just because of their petty anger towards Duke, and further, that if Mengsk can convince him to join the Sons of Korhal, he would be a most powerful ally against the failing Confederacy. After some mild protesting, Kerrigan and Raynor agree to head out, and so starts our mission. The Sons of Korhal fight their way through to Duke, or they cheese their way through by floating buildings to tank shots from the Zerg anti-air, and just take Raynor in 2 dropships next to the NORAD 2. Either way, Mengsk once again proves himself the silver-tongued savant and entices Duke over to his side by offering him a position on his cabinet. And when Duke realizes that the Confederacy is truly doomed already, he accepts. Mission 7 might contain my favorite bit of subtle storytelling in the whole of the Starcraft universe. The discs we were sent to capture all the way back in Mission 4 have finally been decoded, and though the Sons of Korhal are on the verge of being overrun by Confederate forces, Mengsk feels the need to call a meeting and inform his officers of their contents and the supposed truth behind the Zerg menace. The writing and voice acting here are so good, I'm just going to let it play out and let you hear it for yourselves.
Commander, our position has been discovered. As of 2 hours ago, a large Confederate strike force arrived on Antigua Prime and established a base camp within our defensive perimeter. Arcturus Mengsk is calling a meeting.
Greetings. I know you're all concerned about the Confederate strike force. But first, we have a grave matter to discuss. It seems our data disks didn't hold weapon designs after all. Lieutenant Kerrigan will explain.
You all know that the Confederates run a program for psychically gifted humans, training them to be ghosts. Those running the program found that the Zerg are attuned to the psychic emanations of ghosts.
So the Zerg are here for you, darling? Huh. This keeps getting better and better.
Shut up. There's been a lot of secret Confederate research surrounding ghosts and the Zerg. What we stole was a small but critical piece of the puzzle. Designs for a transplanar psionic waveform emitter. The emitters broadcast the neural imprint of a ghost, but at a much greater magnitude. These things reach across worlds.
The Confederacy used these psi emitters to lure the Zerg into isolated containment areas. Your colony, Mars Sara Commander, was one such location.
What are you saying?
I'm saying the Zerg are a secret weapon developed by the Confederacy. I'm saying you were all subjects of a Confederate weapons test. Just as they destroyed Korhal with nuclear weapons to establish dominance a generation ago, they would use the Zerg to put an end to their other rivals. Only this time there'd be no outrage. Who could suspect the aliens were their creation? No, they'd be lauded as heroes for coming in and destroying the Zerg. It's time the Confederacy paid for its crimes. And I know just the way. Lieutenant Kerrigan is going to plant an emitter at the Confederate base camp. Commander, you will provide her with an escort. When the Zerg arrive, they'll break the blockade for us and we'll make our escape. Now, get moving.
What makes this so good is how Mengsk intermingles truth with lies, and manages to perfectly manipulate everyone around him. It's the perfect tinfoil hat moment, where the Confederacy is simultaneously bloated and inefficient, but also the mastermind behind engineering an entire alien species, using it to attack multiple fringe worlds, and organizing a defense that will see this supposed threat stymied and ultimately defeated. If you've been paying close attention to the story, however, not all of this adds up. Why, for example, would the Protoss be keen on burning down worlds for a simple biological weapon that a lesser race such as the Terrans concocted? So while the Confederacy, like the United Earth Directorate that will come later, sought to weaponize the Zerg by their deployment of the psi emitters. They are not the Zerg's creators. And if you can demonstrate something to be mostly true and factual, it's very easy to slip in a probable lie that will paint your enemies in a horrific light. It's good writing, and a cleverer person might point out that perhaps Mengsk even believes it's true, which is possible, but I think it's more likely that he knows the real truth and is concealing it. Mengsk has either managed to procure or produce psi emitters of his own, and since the Sons of Korhal can't hope to defeat this Confederate army on their own, he decides to use this secret weapon to get the Zerg to do the work for him. Now this might seem like an atrocity to some, but keep in mind that the Zerg are already on Antigua, so he isn't luring them to an unsuspecting colony, but rather redirecting them so that now they might pressure the Confederates and pull their attention away from Mengsk, thus allowing our escape. Throughout the mission, Kerrigan expresses her moral doubts about using such a weapon, and as you finally complete the mission, she tries to get Mengsk to promise that he will never use this weapon again. But Mengsk coldly replies that he will do whatever it takes to save humanity, even if it means using the Zerg. Predictably, the Protoss show up shortly after and destroy Antigua, much like they did Marsara. And while I think the intention might be to blame Mengsk for this, I think the Protoss would have shown up either way, seeing as the infestation was already present and developed on the planet. Whether or not the majority of Antigua's populace was saved or left to die, however, is left for us to decide. With that, we enter the final act of our three-part play, the assault on Tarsonis and the rise of the Terran Dominion. With his allies sorted out and his trump card ready, Mengsk orders General Duke to commence his attack on Tarsonis. At first, Mission 8 doesn't seem to reveal much story-wise. That is, until you wipe out the last Confederate building on the map, and Duke radios in that the psi emitters are in place and ready to go. A shocked Kerrigan intercedes and demands to know who authorized the use of the emitters, to which Mengsk says, "I did." Once again, Kerrigan and Raynor implore Arcturus to rethink his decision to unleash the Zerg on an entire planet, but Mengsk tells them his decision is made. Let me just step in here and say this is an excellent character moment for Mengsk. It's easy to forget where Mengsk comes from. The planet of Korhal, which was annihilated by the Confederacy in a nuclear strike. Destroying the Confederacy isn't just a matter of the public good, or even satisfying his need for power. It's about satisfying a personal vendetta he's held for decades. It's the ultimate eye for an eye moment. The Confederates destroyed my planet, and now I'm going to destroy theirs. But unlike Korhal, which was eventually resettled and repopulated, Tarsonis will forever be a Zerg world. Its infestation irreversible. Its resources forever lost to mankind. So even though Kerrigan and Raynor are the good guys here, they are both too naive to see the real game that Mengsk has been playing, and it's about to cost one of them dearly. Mission 9 is New Gettysburg, perhaps the most infamous mission in the whole of Starcraft, whose events got their own cinematic recreation in Starcraft 2. The deployment of the psi emitters has attracted billions of Zerg to Tarsonis, and the planet is already crumbling. This time, however, the Protoss are hot on their heels, and have arrived on the planet near the Zerg primary hive cluster. Mengsk is concerned that the Zerg will shift their focus to the Protoss, and in the chaos, the Confederate leadership will make their escape. So he orders Raynor and Duke back into orbit, and commands that Kerrigan with a small force protect the Zerg and engage the Protoss, ensuring that no one will leave Tarsonis alive. Raynor once again objects, but this time, he not only fails in convincing Mengsk to back down, he also fails to get Kerrigan to realize that this is a suicide mission from which she will not return. Kerrigan says that she trusts Mengsk, and that he'll come around, and tells Raynor that now's not the time for the knight in shining armor routine. And these are the last words the two speak to each other, while Kerrigan is still human. Even though you know it's coming, your heart still sinks when Mengsk gives the order to leave orbit, abandoning both Kerrigan and the men he sent with her to their fate. Kerrigan radios in for evac one last time, but is met with only static. The story has reached its climax now, and the last mission involves Raynor's official separation from the Sons of Korhal. He implores the Magistrate to abandon this insanity, and the two men, along with the troops who have realized what Mengsk has truly become, fight their way through their former allies and escape the slaughter of Tarsonis. And so ends Mission 10, with the cast having gone their separate ways. Raynor and the Magistrate to parts unknown, Kerrigan to her supposed death, and Mengsk to found the new Terran Dominion with Duke at his side. It's refreshing to see characters built up like this over the course of 10 simple missions and a few cutscenes. And though at first glance we might sympathize with Raynor and come to detest Mengsk, it is in fact only Mengsk who sees the bigger picture and is willing to go all the way to ensure the tyranny of the Confederacy comes to an end. Even though much of what Mengsk achieved in the vanilla campaign is undone by Dougal and the United Earth Directorate in the expansion, the new Emperor still finds a way to claw his way back from the clutches of defeat and retake what is his. Raynor, for his part, despite being the apparent hero of our story, fails in almost everything he tries to do. He fails to defend Marsara and its people, he fails to stop Mengsk in using the psi emitters, and he fails to save Kerrigan's life. In the end, his noble character achieves him nothing, and for all his strength and virtue, he ends up right where he started, alone and on the run from the authorities. And of course, Kerrigan, fated to become the Queen of Blades and the Master of the Zerg. She will serve as a constant reminder to Raynor throughout the rest of the game of his failure, leaving our hero to be eternally tormented for the choices he failed to make. From a storytelling perspective, so much here is done right that it's difficult to cover them all. There isn't a single wasted character here. Even the robotic adjutant who feeds you information does so in a calm woman's voice that you learn to love. And what's even more incredible are the characters who aren't in the story. Think about the Confederacy. Who's in charge? Who is the president? Who is calling the shots on these secret projects with psi emitters? Is it some Confederate deep state project? The only Confederate officer involved in the whole story is Duke, and he switches sides halfway through the campaign, which means that after Mission 6, the Confederacy is a completely faceless government, which sounds like it should be awful, but it absolutely works. Because ultimately, it doesn't matter who's in charge of the Confederacy. What matters is how our team sees them. All of the information we get on the Confederacy comes from sources who absolutely hate the Confederates. We never get the Confederate point of view, and we absolutely don't need it. We know they experiment on humans, we know they develop biological weapons, and we know they test those weapons on the innocent civilian populations of entire planets. Because the story drops the traditional antagonist role, it manages to focus entirely on the cast at hand. Everything Mengsk does is completely reasonable from his point of view, and we gladly help him do this, because before you know it, you, the player, are the Marsara Magistrate. You are invested because they betrayed you as well. It's a type of storytelling that can really only happen in games, and it's something I don't think has been replicated since. If you've never played the original Starcraft, I can't recommend it enough. It's a tough game for sure, so if you're having trouble with the missions and need some help, feel free to stop by the stream at twitch.tv/authorvalentine. Thank you for joining me in today's video, and until the next one, peace.